Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Profiles in Risk. I am your host, Nick Lamparelli. I'm very pleased this morning to continue to try to expand the insurance service organizations, not ISO, but just other organizations' ability to reach out and work with insurance professionals. This morning, I am pleased to introduce Kevin O'Brien. Kevin is the president and CEO of the Inland Marine Underwriters Association, or as it is commonly known, the IMUA. And Kevin, I'm ecstatic to have you on this morning.
Great to be with you, Nick.
I'm going through my email this morning, Kevin. Business insurance, where I get my daily news. First headline: subcontractor default insurance market set to expand. Right underneath that, drone users. 3 lines underneath that, there's information about construction, all lending itself to inland marine coverage. Inland marine is embedded in so much of what we do in insurance and as professionals. I don't think a lot of professionals realize how expansive inland marine is. So I wanted to start this off for the audience sake to talk about inland marine. What is inland marine insurance?
I think that's probably a great direction to go in, Nick, because inland marine is a little bit of an obscure line of insurance. It's a property niche line. And basically, it was created in the early 1900s to complement ocean cargo insurance. As goods were coming into the country via ship, once they got on land, they were getting on trucks and rail, and it gave birth to inland marine insurance. And as we moved forward, inland marine became a little bit more expanded into risks that are associated with like transportation and communication. So, things like bridges, tunnels, goods in transit, radio cell towers, computers, contractors' equipment. And so they've all came under this inland marine niche, if you will. And that industry has expanded, and it is quite a vital part of the insurance marketplace overall, even though it only represents about 2% of the total property and casualty premiums. So it is important, and what's as I mentioned, it's tied into 2 areas: the communication and transportation, but also transportation and construction are what inland marine is really all about. Those are the primary lines. In construction, you have builder's risk insurance, which is coverage for buildings while in the course of construction. And you also have contractor's equipment, which is a major line. Transportation, you have motor truck cargo insurance, goods in transit, and you have warehouse legal liability. We also have fine art is a major part of inland marine.
Generally, my rule of thumb, Kevin, is if I can't immediately recognize what sort of property insurance I'm dealing with, my rule of thumb is it's probably inland marine. It's worked well for me. I could just, when I was a broker, if I didn't understand what I was looking at, I would just call an inland marine underwriter. They would help me sort it out.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, I was a broker for almost 25 years, Nick, and I knew enough about inland marine to get in trouble.
Let's talk about the Inland Marine Underwriters Association. First, what is that? What's its mission?
Okay, so the IMUA was started in 1930, and basically it's an insurance company trade association, nonprofit. And the mission is, kind of twofold, and I'll get into those areas a little bit later, but it's really advocacy and education are our primary objectives. But so the IMUA today has about 52 insurance company members, and that's our primary focus, the Chubb, Hartford, CNAs of the world. We also have over 25 associate members, and that would be attorneys, art dealers, MGAs, people that are not underwriting inland marine lines of business, but are involved in the industry through various paths. And in that group of our member companies and our associate member companies, we have about 3,500 industry professionals. And that's really the group that we serve. So we serve the companies, in an advocacy fashion, and we serve the 3,500 industry professionals with education and training. Inland Marine is kind of a unique line of business in that most of the classes of business are on a non-filed basis. And what that means is that the various insurance departments around the country do not require form or rate filing. So it leaves it fairly flexible for our insurance company members in terms of responding to the needs of the marketplace. So one of the things as far as advocacy that we're very highly interested and sensitive to is we'd like to do as much as we can to maintain that non-filed status of the inland marine lines of business. And it does change from state to state, but overall, it's a unique aspect of the business. It allows for creativity, it allows for market response, and it's something that's very important to our members. So that's where the advocacy level comes in. We're not a lobbying firm by any stretch. We don't lobby. We do monitor, state activity, and where needed, respond to the states and try to help them see that inland marine should be a non-filed class.
That's interesting. You brought that up. I want to go in that direction a little bit. I took a construction class, sometime in 2018. The instructor really pressed on that particular aspect of inland marine. I think we were doing builder's risk. We were having that conversation at the time and talked about, her instruction was, because of the flexibility, when you're doing a builder's risk, when you get that chance, you should always use a non-filed product because it just gives you the most flexibility to work with the customer, to craft it because when you're dealing with construction or anything like that, it's very hard to make it homogeneous. There's always something that kind of bubbles to the surface that makes it complicated, and you want that flexibility to be able to go in, add the coverage, remove the coverage, change the deductible, get the pricing that you need. What's that fine line? What's from filing to non-filing? What if there was like a rule of thumb? At what point does it sort of fall out of, well, this really needs to be filed? How do the state regulators make that determination? Because I do like that aspect of the inland marine DIC coverages where you do have that flexibility. I think that's a winning formula in this complicated insurance marketplace. And kind of from a self-serving standpoint, I'd like to learn more about what that gray area is and when you can and when you can't.
Actually, Nick, when you find out, let me know. Because it is, and again, it varies state to state. And the unique part of inland marine lines of business is that the risk that you're insuring is always different, and a lot of times it's moving. Fine art is always on the move between owners, galleries, contractors' equipment, constantly on the move. You don't know where it's going to be used. You don't know how it's going to be used. Builder's risk, totally different in downtown Manhattan versus Boise, Montana. So all those things come into play, and that's why I think the various state insurance departments understand that there needs to be a little rate flexibility, and also that some of these policies do have to have manuscripted endorsements. So I think that's kind of the way that evolves.
Yeah. Why do insurance professionals in and around inland marine, why do they need a service organization to work with?
Well, over the years, and especially I would say within the last 20, 25 years, as you know, insurance companies have dramatically cut back on their in-house education. And because inland marine only represents 2% of a property casualty premium, the in-house education for inland marine, basically disappeared from the landscape in terms of within our insurance company members. And we've picked up that void and really dedicated ourselves to providing various educational formats for our members because they need it. It's not available anywhere else. Well, a couple minor other opportunities that are out there that we can talk about. But so what we do is, through webinars, seminars on a regional basis, we have our annual conference, which attracts over 300 folks, and that's very much an education format. And, so that's where we're trying to deliver value and maintain relevance. What we're doing right now, Nick, is we're just launching a project to develop online e-learning courses. And we're tackling that. We have a 2-day intro to commercial inland marine course. We run it every September, and it deals with each of the various lines: builder's risk, contractor's equipment, fine art, etc. And what we're doing is we're taking those courses and we're having them made into an online, on-demand format so that our members can access it, whatever's convenient for them. They don't have to come travel to New York or to other locations to get the education. And we're really excited about that because I think it's a big need. Ultimately, what we'd love to do is to take it past the intro course and have more comprehensive courses for each of those classes of business, which can result in a certificate in inland marine. So that's on the drawing board, not coming anytime soon. Right now, we're tackling the intro course, but that's our focus: is giving the folks, the industry professionals, the education that they need to be successful at their job.
And generally, your courses do qualify for continuing education credits.
Yes, especially that's a tough thing countrywide because that's another one that varies by state.
Yeah.
But yes, we definitely do pursue CE credits, and especially with some of the the education programs that we deliver that also have a very attractive part to our broker community. That's one of the things that we've really concentrated on. I guess over the last 3 years or so, our members said, "Hey, look, it would be so much more beneficial if your events included brokers." And I think one of the key reasons for that is they would like brokers there because they can justify the expense of attending the event.
But they can also get deals done too, right?
Exactly. Networking is a big part of what we deliver to our members.
Completely.
All of the education events that we do, we try to build in time for networking, renewing old friendships and making new contacts. So the broker community, we launched a program called the Producer Affiliate. And what that does is it allows brokers to access IMUA without paying dues or an assessment. They can access IMUA and they can make themselves, they can take advantage of our courses at member prices. And it's done very well. We have over 140 different brokerage firms throughout the country, and about 600 of their in-house producers or brokers that are in our database now. And we're definitely seeing an uptick in the involvement with the broker community.
Yeah. What are your large event that you have? Where is it? Generally, when do you have it? And what sort of speakers, panelists do you or educational opportunities exist for that large event?
So we call it still the annual meeting, which is kind of an old-fashioned term, but we like it. It works. And we do it every May, primarily May. It has been occasionally in June or April. And what that is, it's a 2-day format of education. So we try to bounce back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast. So this past May, we were out at the Hyatt Regency Scottsdale. And we broke the 300 attendee barrier for the first time. If we go back about 6 years ago, we were running maybe 200 folks will come to the conference, and the last few years we've been up at 280, 285, and I think Scottsdale was about 315. For 2019, we'll be at the Lansdowne Resort, which is in Leesburg, Virginia, 15 minutes outside of Dulles Airport, and about 40 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And the format for the meetings is we come in, we kick it off on a Sunday night with a nice cocktail party and dinner. Again, a good networking opportunity. Monday, we have a keynote speaker. This coming 2019, that'll be Jerry Theodoro, who is with Conning & Company, and very astute in terms of what's happening in the inland marine business and the property casualty industry at large. And then we have 5 other education sessions, 90 minutes in length, basically. One of them will be on builder's risk, soft cost, delay in startup and completion. We have another session on supply chain disruption. And then kind of a neat thing that we're doing this year is we've recruited 4 millennials to do a session on lessons from losses. And so what that entails is each one will highlight a claim or a loss that they've experienced or had some experience with, whitewash it to protect the innocent and the guilty, and then spend about 20 minutes talking about the nature of the loss, what happened, what went wrong, what could have been done differently. And so we're really looking forward to that format. We did that a few years ago, and it was very well received. So that's kind of the way the conference works. We have AM Best TV on site each year for the past couple of years, and they'll be there again at Lansdowne. And what they do is they're filming interviews with folks throughout the conference. It's not taping the sessions, but it's doing interviews with the presenters, with various underwriters and managers and so on. And that's been really nice. I think we did the conference in Scottsdale with AM Best, and I think to date we've had about 4,000 hits on the AM Best TV site to kind of view various portions of the conference. So I think that gives us some nice exposure to the industry.
Yeah, you brought up millennials. That's an interesting topic. It's already difficult to get young professionals to come into insurance. Big focus of insurance nerds, and one of the reasons for launching this podcast was to bring exposure. But extending that out, inland marine is probably very, very much underknown than traditional insurance. But I would think inland marine is actually that sort of exciting, potentially exciting aspect of insurance that probably would be quite attractive to millennials. I mean, we're dealing with the more complicated exposures. A lot of them could be technical in nature. I remember at one point you talked about communication and computers, but it could go all the way to drones. It could get really complicated in its exposure, which to me would lend itself to being quite attractive to millennials. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about figuring out additional ways to get younger professionals, not only to come into insurance, but why not come into inland marine?
Sure. No, yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. It's inland marine requires some creative thinking from an underwriter standpoint. In fact, there's an old saying in the industry that inland marine it's more of an art than a science in terms of inland marine underwriting, because of the various changes in the exposures. So what we've done, one of the interesting things we've done with that, Nick, is that at our annual conference each year, we award what we call 4 scholarships to students at risk management schools. And a scholarship is a all expense paid trip to the annual conference. And we've been doing that for several years now. We started the program with the Katie School, which is Illinois State University, a very prominent risk management school. So they've kind of been the anchor each year. They get 2 of the awards. And then we try to select a risk management school kind of local to the venue. So this year we'll have Virginia Commonwealth. We'll also have 2 of those. And so we believe that gives us some pretty good exposure. We also have a whiteboard video that could be viewed on our website in our membership area. And the whiteboard video is just about a 2-minute segment that says, what is inland marine insurance? And it goes through the exposures and why it's an interesting career. And what we do is we send that out to risk management schools just so they can kind of use it as an educational piece for their students. So we're definitely trying to make inroads into that group. And as you said earlier, it's a big challenge for the insurance companies to recruit that talent.
Yeah. Yeah. How about your background? How was the lure of insurance strong enough to recruit Kevin O'Brien into insurance?
I love to ask that question to the young folks, and mine is a classic. I got out of college and I was selling copy machines for 3M in Manhattan. So, had a video training for copy machines, was given a 10-block territory in the middle of Manhattan and told to stay away from any large companies. And so about 3 or 4 months later into that gig, I was scheduled to go on 100% commission. So having placed, I think, one machine in that time, I decided, okay, it's time to move on. And I just went to an employment firm and got a job as a supervisor with operations at Allstate Insurance. That lasted about 2 years. And interestingly enough, those were the days where they had big service centers, Nick. And so the one I worked at was on Long Island, and there was probably 500 folks in that campus. And everybody was, 90% of them were between, 20 and 30. And of those folks, 90% of them were young females. So it was an interesting place to work. Unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, I got engaged about 2 weeks after I started there. So, but anyway, so I worked at Allstate, then I actually transferred over to be an agent with them and did the Sears booth routine. Then I went to the independent.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt you. For those that
Sure.
those that are listening that may not understand that, can you explain the reference to the Sears booth?
Yeah, actually, I guess it does need to be explained since Sears has kind of gone away too. But so in those days, Sears owned Allstate, and what you would do as a broker, once you got your training, you would be assigned to a Sears store, and the Sears stores, they all had a booth, which basically usually had about 2 agents, on duty at all store hours. And the idea there was that you got exposure to the customers and it helped you build up your book of business. If you were successful in building up a book of business, you could move out to a neighborhood sales office. So that's kind of that was the route that went. I guess my problem with Allstate was when I was there, primarily it was auto and homeowners, and you could make a very good living. It had a really nice compensation plan, but they ended up requiring some heavy life insurance requirements from the agents, and the product wasn't that good, and so I kind of decided to move on, and I ended up with the Independent Insurance Agents of America, which is a national trade association for agents and brokers. They were headquartered in New York, and I spent about 6 years with them until they moved to Washington, D.C., and I had seen the lifestyle of many brokers, which was pretty nice. So that's why I jumped into the broker world and did commercial insurance for about 20 years. Most of it with a regional agency on Long Island, which had a heavy construction focus. And then I guess in 2011 is when I kind of sold my shares in that business and then joined the IMUA.
Oh,
kind of came full circle from the Agents Association to the Underwriting Association.
Great background, and the reference to Allstate and Sears just goes to show you the industry has evolved quite a bit. It's very much different than the way it operated in the 70s or in the 80s or even in the 90s. Some things, frustratingly, are still functioning in the same way, but that's usually, I think, technology in the background. That's part of the biggest problem. The future of inland marine. I'm seeing, again, getting back to the tech aspect of it, we're dealing with sensors, IoT. You brought up supply chain, which can mix sensors and IoT and other very complicated exposures that require, quite a bit of big data, quite a bit of modeling. What is the future of inland marine? When as you're doing planning for the IMUA and you're peering out 5 to 10 years, is there anything on the horizon that you're seeing that's like, we need to be prepared for this?
Sure. And we've had at various conferences, we've had this as a topic in terms of analytics and where it's all going. As you mentioned, the Internet of Things and wearables and everything like that. So I think one area that's really come a long way right now is the use of telematics. And telematics is basically measuring different things on contractors' equipment, such as hours of use, radius of use, how the machine is being operated, and so on. So all of that data is now being captured with telematics. The challenge, though, is to get that data into the hands of an underwriter at their desk. And if you think about it, if I'm a contractor and I see all this is being recorded with telematics, the only reason I'm going to want to share it with my insurance company is it's going to be a lower price.
Yep.
And I'm not going to be guaranteed to have a lower price. So that's one of the obstacles in that. But it's definitely here to stay. Another area that we've seen big advances is with different types of security. By that, types of security on trucks for seals, for cargo, security at job sites for builders risk. That's become a really big thing. There's a company called Tattletale out there that's kind of exhibited at our trade show. And what they have various alarm systems that are internet-based for job sites that are in the course of construction. And they'll measure, obviously they have a fire alarm system, but they also will now be able to measure the presence of water. And water damage has become the new fire for builders risk exposures. So there's a whole lot going on there. In the fine art world, there is a product now that will attach to it's maybe a dime-shaped item. It'll attach to the back of a piece of fine art and basically creates an alarm system for it if you don't want it to be moved from its location. So there's a whole lot going on there. And the challenge, as I said earlier, is the data's out there, but how do you capture that data and how do you bring it to a meaningful format for your underwriter?
Yeah. Do you think because of that, data and technology has also spilled over to the traditional P&C world, do you think the lines between traditional property, inland marine, will get fuzzier? Or do you think there'll be situations or more opportunity for inland and traditional property to kind of merge or partner together to solve some of these more complicated exposures?
Very interesting question, Nick. I think the property casualty world in general is ahead of inland marine in terms of using analytics and so on. One of the things that's interesting that we've seen a little bit, not a whole lot, is that some companies are training their property underwriters in the inland marine lines of business. And that kind of can take them away from having a standalone inland marine operation. And so it expands the property underwriters' responsibilities, especially companies that are pretty aggressively into construction. So when you get a construction risk, there's going to be builder's risk, there's going to be contractor's equipment, there's going to be GL, and there's going to be standard property. And a lot of those folks are now training, they're cross-selling their underwriters, their property underwriters in the inland marine lines. And in some cases, the inland marine is kind of drifting off a little bit. We don't see a whole lot of it, but that is one of the trends we are aware of.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. So aside from the IMUA, or maybe part of the IMUA, for people that are listening, how can they raise their game when it comes to inland marine? How can they learn about inland marine? Are there other resources that you would recommend, books, websites, certifications, for someone, young insurance professional that's like, yeah, I really want to look into inland marine a little bit more. It sounds more appealing. If you were doing that, or you were guiding, a relative, how would you guide them to become to get into inland marine and to also become an effective professional?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, I would advise them to access the IMUA educational offerings. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we have that many people are not aware of is we have a pretty extensive library of white papers that are accessible through a search engine on our website. So, for instance, if you wanted to learn about soft costs and builder's risk, you could Google that, and you would come up with various papers that mention that. So that's something that's underutilized, and we're trying to promote that a little more. However, going outside the IMUA, the Institute offers a designation, an AMIM designation, which is an Associate in Marine Insurance Management. And that encompasses both ocean and inland marine. And it also, I think you have, there's two books, AMIM 121 and 122. 122 is the inland, 121 is the ocean. And then I think you need to take a smattering of CPCU courses. and that ends up in a designation, through the institutes. And one other outside source that is really excellent is IRMI has published a book called the Builder's Risk Book. And that's like the Bible of Builder's Risk. It's very, very comprehensive. In fact, Steve Coombs is just going through a rewrite of that. And I think they're expected to launch that in about 6 months or so. But so those are two really good sources. The AMIM 122 course goes through each of the major lines of inland marine in a pretty extensive yet understandable format.
Awesome. This is Kevin. This is the part of the podcast where I transition over and ask you a couple of personal questions. The one that I didn't put on the agenda, but I've been asking more often, is if you had to be stranded on a desert island, which album would you take with you?
I'll go with the Beatles' White Album.
Oh, nice. And you got to love that because it's actually 2 albums in one. So you get
That's right.
You get double your money on that one. Okay, I like that. What tools or techniques do you use to stay productive and or organized?
Not a whole lot there. I mean, I'm a servant to or a slave to Outlook, so that's
Okay.
that keeps me organized really. And as far as productivity goes, the only thing that I kind of try to do is I try to exercise regularly because I think that actually improves your productivity. And I try to do it actually at lunch. It breaks up the day really well, and it kind of gives you a second wind for the afternoon.
I love that. Not enough is being done on that part. I read an article somewhere where the woman that was talking was she was a former high school athlete, never got really good, but she was saying how regularly she exercised, and she's just always amazed at how good she feels afterwards, and that just sets you off for a fine day. So I like that answer a lot, Kevin. Um, have there been any books that have been influential in your business and or personal lives?
Well, I saw that on the outline, Nick, and I didn't want to start going into the from good to great and all that stuff. But one thing I will say is, something that's a little bit old school, but I would encourage, especially younger folks, to read the book, and that's Dale Carnegie's book on how to win friends and influence people. And two things that I took away from that and still try to practice every day is, one is the fact that a person's name is the sweetest sounding word to that person in any language. So use it. And basically, when you're interacting with people, try to use their name as much as possible. And the other thing, which is also extremely simple, is you need to train yourself to be a good listener. And so I try to take those things away from it from a personal standpoint as far as books go. Recently, I've kind of been a little bit into historical fiction. Read The Hamilton Affair, Nightingale, and then Beneath the Scarlet Sky. So each giving some really good historical perspective to the things that I missed when I was goofing off in school.
You don't know this, Kevin, but my dream is to spend a year or two as a sabbatical writing some historical fiction on World War II. So I love that genre. I love creative minds that can take a historical topic and kind of dig around the edges of it, give you the educational perspective of, wow, that's what really happened, but then start to bend it like, what if this would have happened? What if this one event didn't happen? And then how history would have played out. So I think that's a very underrated genre that's people are just now getting more creative in. I would love to spend some time in there. So I will put all of these on the show notes for anyone that's listening. So if you're driving, just go to the website when you get to your destination. Don't pull over. Don't try to search while you're driving. I want to keep your exposures to a minimum. But Kevin, this was very insightful about the IMUA. I will put all of your connections, all of the IMUA connections and everything we talked about in the show notes for everybody. And I appreciate you coming on and educating us about inland marine.
Hey, thanks, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity. It was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you. My guest this week has been Kevin O'Brien, president of the IMUA. Kevin, thanks again.